Hey everyone, Colin Wilson, senior writer with Action Network. That was part one of how to create an initial set of power ratings. That'll bridge over into part two, which has to deal with coaching staff and roster production. Lots of good stuff in there, from assigning grades to head coaches, to coordinators, even crazy things like in New Mexico, where a head coach is now the defensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator is now the head coach. We're going to talk about roster production. That includes returning production. That includes transfer portal. And that should get you set up for part three.
Head coaching coordinators can turn the direction of a program north or south. Ask LSU and Joe Brady. Ask what Matt Rule was to Baylor. There are a lot of examples of this, and a head coach means everything. I would say way more in college football than it does in the NFL. Scott Frost improved Central Florida's power rating from 46.15 in 2015 to 87.11 in 2017. A massive, massive jump for Central Florida. Alabama defensive coordinator Pete Goulding, that's a name that's on the rise, has been for a while. I noticed him years ago when he was UTSA, the Roadrunners. Their defensive havoc rating went from 55th to 15th. Every time the Roadrunners took the field, they were causing sacks. They were breaking passes up. They were in the backfield, creating pressure, just havoc everywhere on the field. And UTSA was a really good team to bet on back in 2016 and 2017. And that goes back to the defensive coordinator, Pete Goulding. So if you know your offensive coordinators that are good at explosiveness, and you know your defensive coordinators that are good at generating havoc, then you got a pretty good idea the kind of culture they're going to bring to the team when they move on to a new position. Exercise power rating bumps based on linear gains and losses year to year for head coaches and coordinators. So really, what we're trying to say here is, when a coach moves, and I had mentioned Danny Gonzalez and his time that he's had with Arizona State and mostly San Diego State. When he moves on to New Mexico, I automatically give a bump there. When I don't like what Marcus Arroyo has done as an offensive coordinator at Oregon, and he takes off and he takes the job at UNLV, I downgrade UNLV a little bit because I wasn't impressed with the job that he did before. Find yourself a tool. As I've got some screenshots here with some offensive coordinators, some defensive coordinators, and some stats, some winning percentage, really what they were able to do. You just get down to did they improve the team while they were there? If you can, use tools like Football Outsiders, dump other stats, and look at coaches year to year and what they've been able to do, you're going to be able to know when this coach moves on, if it's a bump up or if it's a bump down because of a coaching change. Very important in a power rating. Next, we're going to move on to roster production. Returning production is defined as a weighted method of returning statistics year over year. Joe Burrow responsible for what, 90 something percent of the LSU offense, whatever, wasn't when he turned around and handed it off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So obviously returning production for LSU very low on the offensive side of the ball. The threshold for maintaining production is 53% on offense, 63% on defense. So what does that mean? If my total passing yards were, say, 1,000 and I return 530 of that, then I'm going to not give you a bump positively, and I'm not going to give you a bump negatively on offense for that position. If you come in below 53% on offense, I'm going to downgrade you in your power rating. Come in above 53%, you're going to get an upgrade. Same thing on the defensive side of the ball. You return more than 63% on your defense, you're going to get a huge bump. So if we look at the graphs, before I get to the sub bullets here, let's look over to the graphs on the right. Returning production for offense and defense have two different grades. Obviously, if you're a very high returning offense, you're going to get a ceiling of 7 points in your power rating. And if you're on returning production defense, your ceiling is going to be 5. On the flip side of that, you could lose 7 points in your power rating just because you only return 34% on the offensive side of the football. Think about Oregon this year on offense. They're below that 34% rate. Returning production on defense, you lose more than 34%. You could take a 5-point hit in your PR. So this is something that you're going to have to build on your own. This is something manually that you're just going to have to say, hey, the returning production on this side of the ball comes in at 69% on offense. I'm going to give it a 3.5-point positive bump. Now, we can tweak these year over year, but really this is based upon teams that we've seen that have returned this amount of production. This is how much their power rating moves year after year. Cal returns the most offense this year at 93%. They got a PR adjustment of points plus 7. I know USC is not on this slide, but that's a big reason why USC got a huge bump in the Action Network power ratings. They returned almost everything on both sides of the ball, one of the highest marks of any team. LSU returns the least amount of offense at 30%. They had a PR deduction of -7 for the 2020 season. Georgia Tech returns the most amount of defensive stats, 94% for a PR increase of +5. Very important because I'm higher on Georgia Tech than anybody else. They played decent defense last year in Jeff Collins' first year. Now everybody comes back. They know the scheme. They know the coaching staff. I expect better out of Georgia Tech on the defensive side of the ball. Offense, it's really it's a whole nother story when you're moving on from a Paul Johnson triple option with some of the players that were in the recruiting pipeline. Utah returns the least amount of defense at 27%. They had a PR deduction of -5, so it's going to be a struggle year for the Utes. A scale of production percentage versus PR revision is needed. So year after year, you just kind of look at this, reference your chart, and make adjustments as needed. So let's talk about recruiting. Recruiting is extremely important. This is the lifeblood of every college football program, and it doesn't have an impact during the season. So if Clemson beats a team by 28 and they were favored by 42, recruiting has nothing to do with that. Now, when a player goes down, right, like with Purdue this past year, Purdue ran through quarterback after quarterback. I want to say, I don't want to be wrong, I know it was at least 3, but it might have been 5 different quarterbacks were taking snaps under center for Purdue this year. But really, like I said, it's a baseball term, VORP, value over replacement player. Are you adjusting Purdue that much because of what they have behind them? Well, that's where you turn to recruiting. So right now, if Trevor Lawrence was to go down, who would his backup be? Well, don't you know it? They've got another 5-star composite, .99 quarterback right behind Trevor Lawrence. So if Trevor Lawrence was to go down with injury, just hypothetically, there really wouldn't be that drop off as far as recruiting is concerned because they've backfilled the position. So recruiting has minimal impact on a power rating adjustments during the middle of the season, but it's something that I take into effect, especially a 3-year gauge at the skill positions. The skill positions are so important. Quarterback, wide receiver, secondary. These are the units that mean the most to a power rating in a college football team, and they're the hardest to replace. So composite scores from 247 are a tool to judge replacements and units that mean the most. Trevor Lawrence goes down. What do we have back behind him? You have some of these MAC schools, like Nathan Rourke for Ohio. If he goes down, do we have anything behind him that can do the things that he does? That's where recruiting becomes uber important in adjusting your power ratings.